A very good evening to one and all present here. I am Sona Mayatra, member of the social media marketing core team of the Mediascape community at the DY Patil University and your host this evening. Since we have everyone gathered and online now, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker. Our speaker for the evening is a competitive and resourceful medical graduate who commits to patient welfare and to put her knowledge and understanding of medicine to good use in a challenging work environment. She did her schooling from Ryan International School, followed by junior college at Jai Hind College of Arts and Science, and finally her MBBS at the DY Patil University School of Medicine. Her clinical exposure includes cardiology consultancy at Mount Sinai Beth Israel in New York and Sunny Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. She is a hardworking student, a diligent faculty member, a compassionate doctor, and a driven leader. Skillful, highly organized, competitive, and resourceful, presenting to you Dr. Kritika Bhatia. Over to you.
Thank you, Sonam, for such a lovely introduction. These are very kind words said by you guys. I would also like to thank all the members of Mediescape who've made this webinar possible for us today. And first of all, it's a crazy number. I can actually see 89 to 90 participants right here. Well, I'm really grateful for everyone to join this, and I hope I can clarify as many questions that you have or have been frequently asked to me. But before I start, I would just like to mention that I'm still in the process of clearing all the steps myself. So I will try my best to give all the information that I got after researching and, getting to understand everything about USMLE. So I hope you guys have a great session with me. So I'm going to share a small PPT with you guys as I speak along. And am I clearly audible, Sonam? Okay, so 1 second. Let me just try screen sharing. Yeah. Okay, please move on to the next slide. Okay, so let's begin our session, and I would like to highlight the few common pathways that people tend to choose after MBBS, and that varies for different countries. Like people who want to pursue their post graduation in India, they need to clear the exam NEET, like everybody knows that. And from 2022 it might change to next, which is going to be very similar to USMLE itself, as it's going to be divided into 3 steps, like next 1 2 3. Secondly, which we all are here today, is for USMLE, which is the licensing exam for United States. The third competitive exam that people tend to go for is PLAB, which is required for you to practice in the United Kingdom. Okay, move to the next slide. So what I want to really highlight here is that these are not the only 3 career options that you have after MBBS. A lot of people do not wish to pursue clinically oriented careers later on. They do not wish to, specialize into medicine, surgery, OBGYN, etc. But a lot of people tend to take other paths, such as masters in public health. Please go back to the previous slide. Go back to the previous slide, Akash. Yeah. This one. The other career options. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, like I was saying, that another option which people have after post graduation is masters in public health. Now, this can be pursued in India as well as in other countries. DY Patil has also started this new course, which is Masters in Public Health. MPH is also available in the United States. So, a lot many times when people are not able to clear USMLE, or it's kind of becoming a long and a difficult process for them, people in the meanwhile tend to do this course in United States, which is Masters in Public Health. It's a 3-year course. So as and when they keep studying for this course, they simultaneously prepare for USMLE, because the curriculum in India, MBBS per se, it does not kind of teach us how to approach these competitive exams, be it NEET, be it PLAB or USMLE. So every student is confused. They go to different career counselors. Believe me, I have done that myself. But they all, I don't know if I should say this, but most probably they like you to get enrolled with them. They tell you that they are going to help you throughout the path. They'll help you how to prepare, get you there, because they have tie-ups of universities over there and all, but they do not actually give you a gist of the entire process. And so this is one pathway. People tend to do masters in public health in United States, try to understand how the culture over there is, if they're liking the place, if they are going to be well versed with the healthcare system in the United States, because it is very very different from what we practice here in India. So that's one pathway. The other is that eventually, while doing MBBS, a lot of people realize that they are good with management skills, leadership, organizing stuff. I myself have somewhere considered this option for myself, like masters in hospital administration. So this is another pathway that you could pursue in various countries, including United States, where this is specific to the healthcare sector. So say tomorrow you could be a director at the hospital, you could be a CEO of the hospital. If you're very good at management and qualities like communication, leadership and all, this is another option that you can consider. Third is people also tend to go for MBA after MBBS. I mean, to me, particularly, it does not make complete sense, because you already did 5.5 years in medicine, and then switching your career altogether with an additional MBA degree. If you ask me, I would prefer MHA over MBA, because it's more specific towards the practice that we've had for 5.5 years. The other programs for countries like South Africa and a few other countries, they call it as a supernumerary program. Now for these countries, they do not actually need any entrance exams per se. What they consider your consistency of the scores throughout your medical school, and probably give more focus on the final year scores. So for people who are not willing to opt for this long pathway, which is USMLE or PLAB or whatever, there are a few countries where these supernumerary programs are there. I think mostly Gulf countries, I would say, and countries like South Africa and all, they have these supernumerary programs. So anybody who wishes to pursue their career in countries other than US, UK, Canada, they could definitely go for this. Um, so USMLE exam scores are valid in 5 countries as far as I know, which is US, Australia, New Zealand, and there are 2 more countries. I'm really not sure of it, but I know that it's valid in 5 other countries. Now, why United States and why USMLE? So, difference between UK and US is that see, it's not the time anywhere is going to be the same. Like say you do MBBS, you don't want to kind of waste another year in preparing for competitive exams, and you just want to continue with your education. So people tend to just prepare for NEET and kind of take admission in India, anywhere in India, and they continue with their studies. Okay, one priority is time for some people, And for others, they do not mind spending another year taking a break to prepare for these competitive exams, because I feel that in the long run, it really doesn't matter that if one of your batchmate just got into a PG seat in India, and you are still preparing for USMLE or PLAB or any other country, because in the longest run, it's your career, it's your decision, made along with your family. So at the end of the day, you all are going to be amazing doctors, and you will be having your own practice. So it doesn't really make that much of a an issue. So one is time where people decide मैं NEET करूँ या मैं USMLE करूँ या PLAB करूँ. That's one thing. Second is that the difficulty level of the exam. So definitely medicine itself, I would say, is not very difficult, but it's very vast and volatile. We all know that when we are studying MBBS itself, be it from first year or till the final year, we know how volatile it is. So the only key for any competitive exam is that you need to keep revising it. So I wouldn't say, a lot of counselors say that USMLE is the most difficult exam. Then comes PLAB, then comes NEET. I wouldn't say it's based on the difficulty level, but it's based on the time it consumes and the protocols and the process that each country has. Also, the method of preparation changes for all these three exams because the paper pattern is different. So the type of questions they ask, the subjects that it includes are different, and hence people say that USMLE is very difficult. फ्लैप तो 9 महीने में हो जाता है, USMLE को 1-1.5 साल लगता है. That's how it is. But as far as I know and I'm preparing, it's not very difficult. Definitely it's time consuming. Definitely you need to give a certain amount of time for a certain amount of step to be completed. Okay, that's the only difference. So the third point which you should keep in mind before deciding whether you want to do USMLE, PLAB, or say any exam is also your financial matters that you need to discuss with your family. Because yes, USMLE is expensive, PLAB is expensive. NEET, if you go to compare with the other two, is not that expensive. But okay, on the contrary, after NEET, the fees you pay in India for your post graduation seat is way more than you would pay in UK or US. The best part about US is that you do not have to pay any fee if you get selected for your residency. They in turn pay you a stipend. So basically, it's either you spend, more on your resources and on the pathway to USMLE, and then you don't have to pay any fees for residency. Whereas in India, you pay less for the resources, and for cracking NEET, NEET is not very expensive. Yeah, of course, it is difficult like any other competitive exams, but if you ask me, then the fees you pay for your postgraduate seats is way higher than what you will earn. Okay, so that's another point that you need to keep in mind when you decide whether you want to do NEET, whether you want to do PLAB, or you want to do USMLE. One is the time, that if you're willing to put the time. Second is like the money as well. You need to discuss this with your family, because I'll tell you an approximate amount of money that would go while preparing for USMLE. It would be no less than 10 to 15 lakhs. It's just for the process for you to get matched there. Okay. So, okay, I've explained you how you can decide as to whether you want to do NEET, PLAB, or USMLE. Now I'll try to explain you the pathway that United States follows. Okay. I mean, I don't know if all of you are aware about this, but US does not have a MBBS degree per se. They have a program called as MD program, which is equivalent to MBBS degree. But in India, for us, MD is a post-graduation degree. For them, MD program is an undergraduate degree, and that MD title continues for them even when they do when they pursue their masters. Okay, unlike us, that we have MBBS and then we have MD. So I've just depicted a graphical this thing representation as to the pathway that US follows. So for us, we do MBBS after the 12th grade. After 12th, we give NEET and then we get into a medical school. For them, it's not like that. For them, they don't have boards in their 10th and 12th. For them, the boards are these exams. For them, USMLE is actually called a board exam. Okay, so they try to follow this after 10th grade. So after 10th, they have to do a major in any subject, say biology, psychology. So they become a major in that. That's when they say they are a pre-med student. Okay. So for them, the concept of pre-med is that I am thinking of getting myself into medical school. Okay. So for them, it's known as BS, like it's Bachelor's of Science. Okay. For us, we already do this in our 11th and 12th. We already do biology, chemistry, and everything. So for us, it's something very different. So that's why for international students, like for students from outside of India, which are known as IMGs, which is for every country other than USA, it's not only for India, but anybody who belongs to a non-US country is considered as an international medical graduate. So um, for them they directly have to enroll in the residency program for our level. Say for people who are willing to do this after 12th, they need to do pre-med first, then they have to get into MD program, and then eventually into residency. That's why people do MBBS from India, because they think 5.5 years is a shorter duration compared to a 7-year course to finish your undergraduation. But what I would say is that it takes up the same amount of time. You graduate after 5.5 years, you take a year to prepare for USMLE. It kind of almost takes up the same time for you to reach the level of residency and for them to reach the level of residency. So the advantage that they have in 7 years is that USMLE is a part of their curriculum already. So if the MD program is for 4 years, after 2 years, they have to give step one. They have to give step one, and only then they can continue the other 2 years. Like India is planning on doing with next. So you have to give those steps when you are already in medical school. That's a mandate for them, for for the people studying in US. But for us, till the end of time, we don't even know that something like USMLE exists, and then it's too late for us to realize, oh, we wanted to do USMLE and PLAB, and then we have no path to follow because we feel that we are very late for it. So that's not the case. The only difference is that for them, USMLE is a part of the curriculum. They're trained according to that. For us, we need to put in extra efforts, get extra resources to give more of a time for figuring out how to do, what to do, from where to do. So I'll move on to the next slide as to give you more detail about USMLE and its steps. Can be, yeah. So, like I already said, since I have a mixed crowd here, there might be people who are still in their first year and who don't know anything about USMLE. So, let me just give you a brief that it's a United States medical licensing exam, and it is required by everybody, be it an American medical graduate or an international medical graduate. For people like us, it is mandatory. It is not that people who are studying med school in US do not have to give this exam, and it's only for us, for people from India who want to go and pursue medicine there. It's basically a licensing exam that every graduate should have for them to be able to have their own practice, or for them to be able to work in a hospital over there. Like we have our state council registration, only after which we can practice, which is like for Maharashtra would be a Maharashtra Medical Council registration. The same way, it's a licensing exam for that country that you need to clear before you can start practicing over there. So, like I already said, the difference is that they have this as a part of their curriculum, whereas it's something additional for us. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so let me explain you about the steps of USMLE. So USMLE is divided actually into 3 steps, which is step 1, 2, and 3. So step 1 basically includes all the subjects of the first and second year, whereas step 2 was previously divided into 2 more sub steps, which is step 2 CK, which is clinical knowledge, and step 2 CS, which was clinical skills. So at my time, when I went to the States, I did my electives and I gave my step 2 clinical skills, because step 1 and step 2 CK can be given from India, from your home country, whereas step 2 CS was supposed to be given in the United States only, since it was a practical exam. They would assess your clinical skills and abilities. So all of these 3 steps are an 8-hour exam. Okay, so step 2 CS that I gave was for 8 hours. But now, because of COVID, since the flights have been cancelled, the travel has been there has been issues with travels and everything. So they have scraped off the step 2 CS altogether, which was initially there for me and my batch, and which wouldn't be there for people who are trying to start preparing now, or have given step 1 but want to give step 2 now. So for them, there would be no CS. As of now, they've said that especially during COVID, there will be no CS, but they are planning to kind of scrape it off altogether as a part of USMLE application, okay, for your residency. So instead of step 2 CS, what they've introduced is something known as OET. Okay, so it's an English proficiency exam in place of step 2 CS, because step 2 CS had certain parts. They would analyze your clinical skills. They would analyze how well you can talk to your patients, like basically a doctor patient etiquettes. Also, there was a section where you were needed to type down your patient notes. Okay, so they would access, as you know, analyze you based on that as well. So it included somewhere it included your English proficiency in speaking as well as in writing. So instead of that, they've now decided to only keep it to OET. Initially, for our batch, it was step 1 to CKCS with TOEFL. Okay, TOEFL is another English proficiency exam. TOEFL, and some places they refer to it as IELTS. So instead of that, they have introduced OET for now. Now, as I said, step 1 includes subjects of first and second year, whereas step 2, clinical knowledge, which is CK, includes the subjects of third and final year subjects. This is for our ease of understanding, because we have the funda of MBBS. They don't have it in a similar way. That's why I'm telling you that step 1 has first and second year subjects, step 2 has third and final year subjects. But basically, step 1 also includes biostatistics, epidemiology, which wasn't there for us in the first year. But I think the newer competency based curriculum involves preventive and social medicine as a subject, also known as community medicine as a subject, which covers biostatistics and epidemiology as well, I guess. So they have something additional known as behavioral science. They give more emphasis on genetics. So for them, it's not like first and second year subjects of MBBS. This is for our ease of understanding. They do have some other additional areas where they kind of emphasize on. So in our first year, we are not being taught deeply about genetics, behavioral science, ethics, biostatistics, and epidemiology. So all of this is additional for someone who is going to prepare for step 1. People ask me that when is the ideal time to prepare for step 1. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Yeah. So, like I was saying, I had a lot of DMs and calls about, I'm in this so and so year of MBBS. Is it like a great time for me to start right now? What would you suggest? Like, I'm already a graduate. Do you think it's very late for me to even think about USMLE or something like that? A very important thing that I want to highlight is that there is no such perfect timing for USMLE steps to be started, like for the preparation. I am sure people who are aspiring to do USMLE must have gone through numerous YouTube videos, counseling sessions and everything, where they say, okay, third year is the ideal time to kind of give your step one exam, because you just freshly studied about the subjects that are involved in step one. I think that's more relevant for American graduates, because during their first and second year, they were trained in such a way that they have to give step one after that. Without that, they cannot proceed in their MD program. Whereas for our system and our education system, we are not specifically trained for it. And if you honestly ask me, if you can start preparing from first year, really very good. But if you ask me, practically possible, I would say not really, because in the first year you're so new, you're still trying to understand the medical terms used, you're still trying to understand the subject, that even after second year you're not able to integrate it with the disease. For us it is anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pharmac and everything, okay, the first and the second year subjects. For them it doesn't work that way. If you see any study material that people, the American graduates use, or the standardized study material, it's always going to be system wise. It will either be cardiology, neurology, renal, respiratory system. That's how their approach is, and that's how they've been taught. So it's easier for them to give step one after 2 years of their undergraduate course. Whereas for us, we just know each subject individually, and we don't know what is the role of that enzyme in that disease until we've cleared final year. I mean, many people wouldn't even remember that after final year, because we do medicine, surgery, OBGY, and all of that there. And I think it is very important to interrelate your subjects and look at the body, and as like the preparation material says, system wise, because we know that some diseases are a part of CVS system or CNS. But there are a lot of diseases, while it affects the heart, it might also affect your kidneys, it might also affect your brain at some point. Okay, so a lot of things are interrelated. So I would say, whenever you decide to start preparing for step one, keep in mind that your approach should be systemic and not anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. Obviously the general part of it, if you would say the basics of genetics or the basic pharmacology, that has to be done. But otherwise, if you ask me, and the type of questions that they ask, it's all clinical scenarios. So they would just say that so and so age person came to the emergency department presenting to you with this and this, blah blah blah. So I mean, which enzyme would be deficient for it? So it becomes a biochemistry question. But the scenario is based on a disease, so you first need to identify, okay, ye disease ke bare mein baat kar rahe hain, and yeah, in this disease this particular enzyme is going to be deficient. That's how the approach is. It's not like neat, not very factual कि anatomy के 17 question आएंगे, biochemistry के 17 आएगा, there's more weightage on PSM, there's more weightage on OBGY. No, that's not how this exam is at all. So I would say, if you can, if you are still in your first year, and if you decide to go for USMLE, make sure, if you want to give the step one in third year, like people tell you the ideal time that it is, make sure you study everything, not from markings, not according to your SAQs, short notes, MCQs. Make sure you read the book in and out, and your approach should be systemic approach, not subject wise. So people who are still in third year, final year, or are interns, or they are graduates like me, it is never too late to start preparing for USMLE at all. A lot of videos says that, you know, I finished it in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I did it in 2 months and I got a 257 on USMLE step 1. I don't really think it's practically possible. It is not at all, because I would say 6 months is a good enough time for you to be prepared for step 1. 6 months. If you are very good at grasping stuff, I would say probably 4 to 5 months. Okay. And by 6 months I mean not on and off studies, but a continuous focus for 6 months. So, why I thought it was practically impossible during the medical school or during the second year? Because we wouldn't, at a stretch, get 6 months to completely focus on this. Because if we would do that, we would kind of hamper our exam and study schedule in MBBS. Right. So, why I say third year? Because the subject load is lesser than the other years. You still have some free time. So the first 6 months of third year is definitely a great time to start preparing if you're very serious about it, and if you have already decided this in your first and second year that you want to do USMLE. Why I'm telling you 6 months is because you need to go through all the videos. You need to study first aid, which is the book for step 1, or any other steps for USMLE. That's the Bible for USMLE. Okay. And then there is something known as UWorld. So UWorld is a question bank which has 3,500 questions in it. And if you want to score really well on UWorld and on USMLE step 1, from what my batchmates have told me and from what I've found out, you need to definitely solve UWorld twice. Definitely. If not twice, at least once. So you imagine you can't do more than 40 questions in a day. They are so long questions that, you know, your mind just gets saturated with it. You could only do 40 questions, which is one block. Okay, imagine there are 3,500 questions, and that too, when you do one block, you might not get everything right. So you need to sit back, review, kaun sa question galat hua, I need to study that again. You know, so it's a process. So if you do 40 questions every day, it will still take you 45 days to complete the UWorld once. That is if you do not miss a single day. Let's be practical. Some days we are ill, some days we have something to attend to, some days we have something going on in the college. So you giving kind of, you know, less, like you giving your time every day for it would be practically impossible. uh, so yeah, I would say that give focus, give 6 months of your time for step 1 if you really wish to do that. So in 2022, we heard that it would be a pass or fail exam for till I think if you give your step 1 in this year, say till December. So till December, if you give it, it's going to be score based. And if you give it after January, like or from January or afterwards, it's going to be a pass or fail exam. Now, why I think the scoring is better for international students and not pass fail is because, say, if an American graduate is also passing, you're also passing. I mean, what's the edge that you have over that person? Obviously, every country prefers their own graduates. Even if you go to, say, your state, like your Maharashtra state itself would prefer somebody who is a bona fide of Maharashtra rather than people from other states, you know. If you go to see government colleges, I'm not talking about private colleges in India, but so I think the scoring system was way better for international students, because that way we would, you know, with the help of the scores, it becomes competitive. We if you know, the American graduate is also passing the exam, we are also passing the exam on our application. If our score is better than them, definitely it gives us an edge over it, right? But they have decided to switch it to pass or fail, and then more importance would be given to your step 2 CK score. Okay, so step 2 CK is not pass or fail yet. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is that the first most important thing that matters is your scores. uh, Other than building up your CV also, the first most important thing is you need a good score. Now it's like, if you just pass, your score gets locked for 7 years. Okay, if you fail, you definitely have a second attempt to step 1. But when you apply, and when the like the program director views your application, they kind of filter you already based on the first attempt and the second attempt. So for them, failing once and scoring really well on the second attempt, they do not generally consider it really great. Rather, they would prefer you took some time, prepare yourself well, and gave step 1 and you have a great score. Okay, so definitely think about what I'm trying to say here. And one more thing that I would like to highlight about step 1 scores, um, it's actually a percentile based. So it's not like same like NEET, it depends on the scores of the topper that you'll get a cutoff. Okay, so there's no definite score that you need, but from the data which has been gathered, it's always said that if you want to pursue medicine or courses of medicine, you at least need a 240 plus. If you want to pursue surgery, your scores have to be 250 plus. Okay, so I've interacted with people having 255 and 257 on both scores, but the interview did not go well and they did not get in. So everything for sure does matter, but yeah, the first most important thing that an international graduate should have is very good scores. Okay, so I've listed a few resources for USMLE preparation available. So first, for people who are doing step 1, obviously first aid is a book that you must have. It's kind of a high yield book, so before you understand first aid, you should be very clear with your basic concepts, because I don't think you can mug up the entire first aid. I mean, sure, if you're very good at remembering facts and mugging everything up, definitely you could do that. But for me, I was more of a concept person, so I would really like to clear my basic concepts first for me to be able to remember any facts and apply that knowledge in my while solving the questions. So first aid is one book which I think you should start using when you start solving questions. Okay, so if you have any difficulty, you could refer to the high yield points, because they just mention what are the important points in that particular system or a disease. But for that, you should already know about the basic physiology, basic anatomy. So they think that वो सब आपको पहले से पता है. That's why we are just giving you important points to remember. It's like a review book for the exam, basically. If you want to clear your concepts, there are 2-3 other resources which are available, which is Kaplan. I'm sure a lot of you all must have heard about it. Other thing that I'm using, and it's a standard for American graduates, is Boards and Beyond. The other thing, which is USMLE RX 360, it is something, say you could say it's an audio book for first aid. So they kind of, for people who cannot directly understand first aid, it kind of explains what is written in first aid. Okay, it's just an audio translation for first aid. Whereas Kaplan and Boards and Beyond, they have a systemic approach. They clear your basic concepts, which are also high yield, not everything from very basic. Yeah, they cover important points, because we don't want to do the entire MBBS again. It's difficult to do the entire 5 years or 2 years in 6 months. So what we need to focus on is the type of questions they ask and what kind of data we need to feed in our brains to be able to solve that. So yes, so Kaplan and Boards and Beyond both use that. I mean, you could decide whichever suits you personally. because few of my friends have loved Kaplan. I personally loved Boards and Beyond. Few of my friends are using USMLE RX 360. So just because someone you know of is using that and it's very popular and everybody says, ha, ye use karna hai, that's not the only reason why you should select your study resource. But take trials. There are 7-day or 5-day free trials available. See which you like better. Subscribe to it accordingly. Other very famous and a good one is a Sketchy Medical that people use for microbiology and pharmacology. I personally have also used it for micro. For now, I'm going to start pharmac. So it's a very good innovative idea wherein it's story based. So there's a sketch where that person is trying to explain you how that bacteria would act, what would be the key clinical features. It's depicted in a story wise manner. So if and the best part is that the videos are short, 7 to 10 minutes. We all know that our attention span is not very great. To be listening to a 1 hour lecture, hardly half of it is going to be registered in our brain. So the best part about Sketchy Medical is that the videos are very short, very interesting, very innovative. Once you have that entire sketch in your mind, you kind of remember everything about that bacteria. Okay, so that's the advantage of Sketchy Medical. I definitely do recommend it as a study resource. The third is Pathoma or Golgi for pathology. So I personally did not like Golgi. I liked Pathoma, and I have completed all the videos of Pathoma, and I think they are more than enough for pathology. Obviously, if you still have Kaplan and Boards and Beyond, and if you would want to do something extra for patho, yeah, you could do it from the already subscribed resources, or you could just review it from First Aid. But I think Pathoma is also fantastic. Initially I did not like Patho that much, but since I did Pathoma, my concepts are very clear. It's a really good resource. And some people for reviewing use flashcards. So personally, if you ask me, I'm not that fond of flashcards. But yes, if you are comfortable with them, if you're busy, if you're traveling, if you have flashcards with you, you want to keep revising, keep putting facts in your head. If you're comfortable, definitely. The next resources, UWorld, which I already mentioned. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so I've told you about what USMLE is. I've told you about the steps, about when you can start preparing, about what all things you need to bear in your mind before you choose USMLE. A very frequently asked question to me is about electives, also known as clerkships or observership. When to do it, how to do it, how to apply, and everything. So, electives and clerkships are the terms used for hands on clinical rotation. Now, what does hands on mean? Hands on means that you are just not shadowing the doctor, you're not just following the doctor in the clinic, but you get to take histories, you get to present cases, you get to kind of examine the patient, you get to basically you get a proper hands on experience with the patient and in the department that you choose to go. Whereas observership is something where you cannot do anything but follow your doctor and see what that person does. It's just like shadowing. So, with the research that I have, observership does not have a great value when you apply for USMLE. When you apply for residency with USMLE, they prefer electives or clerkship. So if you are getting into observerships, I would say I wouldn't recommend that, because you'd be spending a lot of money which wouldn't pay off at the end when you're applying. Yeah, electives and clerkships, definitely it's a requirement for applying to residency. Why is it a requirement? Because that's the only source you get your letter of recommendations from, and they want you to have some sort of clinical experience in the United States before you decide to apply. Because I have seen a lot of people who have gone for they were very keen on doing USMLE, they've gone for electives, and applying for electives is a long process altogether, and they've lost hope and they've decided to do NEET. And a lot of people after going for electives decide that I am not liking the culture here, I'm not liking how it is, and I don't want to pursue my master's here. So of course electives and clerkships will give you an idea whether you really want to do USMLE if you're okay with it, and it is a source of letter of recommendation. So a minimum of 3 letters of recommendation are required when you apply for your residency. So when you should go for electives or clerkship, okay, it depends on the university or the hospital that you're applying to. Majority of them have a requirement that you should be in a final year of your medical school. So for us, internship would be the last year for as a part of for MBBS. So they have that criteria. Like when I went to Mount Sinai in New York, they had this criteria that you need to be a final year medical student, you need to have 100+ score on TOEFL, and you need to have completed certain certifications, basic life support, only from American Heart Association. Okay, there are only few. So we also do BLS in DY Patil, but they did not accept that. They only wanted BLS certification from which is affiliated with American Heart Association. So there are only few places in Mumbai that actually give you that. I had to do that. So the criterias would be very different for different places that you want to apply to, but majority of them would require you to be in your final year. This is because observerships you can get in your third year also. Observerships you can go in your second year also. But if they need hands-on experience, which is electives or clerkship, you definitely, I think the best time to go is internship, because you're finished with studying everything that you need to know. You will understand it better because you will have done your postings over here, and I think that is the best time to go for electives or clerkship. And I don't think any other universities give you electives or clerkship if you're in third year. They would just give you observership, as far as I know. Now, how to apply? How to apply also varies from place to place. So I did, when I did it in Mount Sinai, I had to apply 9 months before. Okay, so when I decided to apply for Mount Sinai Beth Israel, I had to put in my application. So I had to decide I want to do this 9 months ago. Okay, so my application fee was only $1,000, and which is around 70 to 75,000 rupees, which wouldn't guarantee whether you're going to be selected. Okay, once you are selected, you need to pay another $2,000. So which is around $3,000 for one elective that I did. Okay, including the kind of application fee and everything. Now BLS from AHA costed me another 3,500 rupees. You need to get your lab reports done for titers like measles, mumps, rubella, and all of that, because they ask for lab reports that you've been lab reports, or if you have your vaccination chart from your childhood. I did not have them, so I had to get my titers done. Plus they would require you to take 2 vaccines before you go. So of course all of that is expensive, so you need to pre-decide, plan. Yeah, also for some places step 1 is a requirement. For most of the places, if you haven't cleared step 1, you can still go for electives and clerkship. So choose accordingly. So for Mount Sinai, I had to apply way back, and they needed TOEFL scores to be very particular. They just did not need 100+ score, but they needed more than 20 to 22 in each block. So it was out of 120. So if you score 19 in one and 23 in other, they weren't okay with it. They were that specific. So you need to go through the eligibility criteria of various states and various universities or hospitals that you would like to do your electives and clerkship. That's one way to apply, that you can send in individual applications. Second is that my senior had gone to one place, so she had a contact, she had an email address. I directly mailed to that doctor. I went to Brooklyn for that, and he charged me around $1,500 for that for a month. It was OPD. It was an OPD based clinic, and the other that I did was inpatient, like hospital based. So, if not applying individually, if not having, okay, if you have a relative there who is a doctor, who's working in a hospital, and if he or she allows you to do electives or clerkship under them, and they will give you a letter of recommendation, that is also accepted. If you don't have such contacts, if you are not able to apply 6 months before, 9 months before, and you can't decide on them, there are certain agencies which help you with. That I've listed them. One is known as FMG portal. The second is Med Clerkship. The third is AMO opportunities. There are a few others, but these are the trusted ones that I figured out. So they charge you a little extra, but definitely they can get you electives and clerkships and letter of recommendation. They might not get you into the places that you desire. Say, like, I wanted to go to Mount Sinai itself. They didn't have that option for me, so I had to pre-plan it. I had to apply it way before. So that's on you how you want to go about it. If for you it's just a letter of recommendation and the agency is going to help you, and you don't mind going anywhere for it just because it's a criteria for applying to residency, then sure, you can do that. If you have a relative, if you have a contact, if someone's working in a private clinic there and lets you have elective or clerkship under them, that is also very well accepted. Me personally wanted to have an experience there, both OPD and IPD. So I chose to apply individually to the place that I really wanted to go and the department that I really wanted to take. Because when you choose for electives or clerkship on your application, it reflects about how serious were you about this. How serious. Say if I want to do cardiology ahead, I would definitely do my electives in medicine. I would definitely do it in internal medicine or cardiology. If I do my electives in surgery or OBGY and then I apply for medicine and cardiology, the program director thinks, I mean, is this person even sure? Okay, so it sets them off a little bit. So choose your elective or clerkship in the department or in the field that you really want to pursue, that makes your application look better. Also, if you're confused between medicine and surgery at the end of the day, what my friend did was she did one in each to decide whether she liked medicine or she liked surgery. So you could also do that. If people are going during internships, definitely you need to come back and do the repost in your respective college. I mean, at least that I know this about DY. If there are people attending from other colleges, I don't know the rules there. But for people from DY Patil, definitely if you are gone for 2-3 months, you need to come back and finish those 2-3 months. So plan accordingly, because if you're planning to give NEET and USMLE, then you need to be eligible for NEET also, because NEET has certain criteria that you should have finished all your internship by March, April, or May, whatever the month they decide. If your repost is still continuing after that, you're probably not eligible for NEET. So I would say make up your mind as to what you want to do, sit down, plan, and what I think is that only one competitive exam should be your focus, because you can't prepare for everything together. If you think कि मैं USMLE भी पढ़ूंगा, NEET भी दे दूंगा, okay, you can give NEET as a backup. Okay, but you can never give USMLE as a backup. Never ever. You need to definitely decide whether you want to do USMLE or not. If you haven't decided and if you think that, yeah, I'm preparing for NEET, I might as well give step one. No, it's vice versa. If you're preparing for step one, you might as well give NEET. Okay, because see, understand, step one only has first and second year subjects. NEET has all of it. So just understand, when you're preparing for both together, it's not going to be possible, because the approach for both is going to be very different. So make up your mind as to which competitive exam you want to choose. Focus on that and continue that path. Do not kind of mix up everything, that I'll give everything as an option and I'll go wherever I want to go. Okay. So can we move to the next slide? Yeah, like I already I mean, a lot of people told me how can we have a strong CV or resume for a good application. Like I highlighted this, your step scores are the most important thing. Also, they look for something if you've done in the area of research. So our college DY has a lot of opportunities for research. I personally have done that because I was interested in it. That time I didn't even decide if I wanted to do USMLE. But yes, I have done research. I have published papers. So you could also do that. Department of Pharmacology is responsible for all the research work. Definitely, you could have a guide from any department or any faculty that who's already doing has an ongoing project, and if you could help them with it, of course, your name would also be put up in that publication, which is a good point on your resume when you apply for residency. Third, which I already said, are letter of recommendations. Now you need letter of recommendations from both places. One is from your own institute, as well as from people. I mean, the experience that you had in United States. Of course, the letter of recommendations have more weightage from US, but you would also require it from the dean. And if you want to do medicine, if the HOD of the medicine department could give you a good letter of recommendation. Yeah, absolutely, yes, it is very much required, and you should have them to make your application look good. Extracurricular involvement also, because they look at you holistically when they take your interview. um, they just want, see, in any country abroad, they just don't focus on academics. My cousins are there, they study, I've spoken with them, spoken to a lot of people. For them, sports is a mandatory thing, or taking a music class, or doing learning a new language. So they really focus on all of that, but for us it's optional here, definitely. But try to take part if you want to do any volunteering work, or if you want to be a volunteer in organizing a conference. If you get a chance, you want to present a poster or a paper, a scientific paper. If college has any, see, right now there's COVID, definitely, but usually for me, the department would conduct CMEs where students had to prepare on a topic, they had to present it to the entire class. Now, that's how we learned stage presence, communication skills per se. And that's how I think I had an all-round development. I was a part of a lot of events, but not necessarily everyone can cope up with that. But make sure your first focus is your step scores. I wouldn't say you put much focus on co-curriculars just to build your CV, but yeah, it also plays a role in making a good application. So they just want to see your overall development. It could also be a short course that you did online on any other website. Say you did a short course from WHO that you're interested in, or you did any volunteering for NGO. It could be anything. Extracurricular doesn't always have to be singing, dancing, sports and everything, but a lot of avenues that come under extracurricular involvement. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so I tried to cover everything that I was being asked on my DMs, phone calls. So apart from that, I would love to take questions, but just give me 2 minutes. So I think we have Sakshi from Metascape who would help us do the Q&A round. So I'm not sure that a lot of, if they've already posted questions, because so we could just go one by one. Okay, so tell me, what's the first question?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the first question is that I have completed my internship. So could you tell me how long it will take for USMLE preparation?
Okay, I think I already covered that. For me, I think you need 6 months of your time to be very, very sure about giving step one. Now, when you book the dates, you have a 3-month window period. I forgot to mention that. So say if you're planning to give it in August or something, you could book it from June, July, August, or August, September, October. So even if you're not prepared by August, you could, kind of give it in that window period. But I strongly recommend that you solve UWorld, you give NBMEs to check your score, If you're really see, NBME is very close to how they score you on step 1, so it's like a mock test. So please try to check your scores on that and then decide if you're really prepared for it and go ahead for it. I hope I've cleared that. And you should definitely go system wise, not subject wise. Definitely.
Okay, the next question is, I'm a third year student and I want to go for electives. What do you suggest considering the current situation?
Right. So, like I said, third year you would probably only get observerships in United States. The best time for you to go would be in internship. You could start preparing for it when you're in final year. Like you can send in your applications, because you need to send it like 6 months or 9 months before, and then you get a reply after a month, and then you need to pre-plan everything, so it kind of takes the entire year, because you'll need your transcripts also from DY. So you have to give an application, give DD, then your transcripts will come in 15 days. So it has to be pre-planned. So if you're in third year right now, I would recommend that you try to find out where you want to go, what the eligibility criteria are, and the best time would be to go in internship, which I think you still have time. Let's see how the COVID situation is. I think they are also planning to give you online shadowing. I think certain agencies have started that, and they might evaluate you and give you a letter of recommendations. I'm not really sure on that part because I'm still researching it myself. But let's see, as per the situation, what ECFMG, the central board, has to say about this. But for right now, you're still in third year. You still have time for till internship. So don't panic about it right now, I would say.
Okay, the next question is, can one do electives after internship?
Yes, you can do electives after internship, but then they only would be through your contacts or certain agencies, because if you apply individually, no. There is a criteria that you need to be in your final year of medical school. If you are already a graduate, it becomes a little difficult for you to get electives and clerkship. Again, you would get observerships then, which wouldn't have much of a value. But yeah, definitely, if you have a contact, if an agency can put you up for a hands-on, yes, you could go after internship. But for majority of the crowd, I would say plan it during your internship. And one more thing that I forgot to highlight was, when you apply, uh, they look at the years passed by after graduation. So on their website, it's mentioned that if you're a 2-year-old graduate, you're fine. Say if you're a 5-year-old graduate, 10-year-old graduate, and your electives was done long back, the letter of recommendations are very old. I'm not saying you might not get into a residency program, but it decreases your chances. So I would say the window period for finishing everything is within 2 years of your graduation. So plan it accordingly.
Okay, the next question is, since USMLE Part 1 is going to be a pass or fail thing, and USMLE Step 2 CS has been scrapped, will USMLE Step 2 CK will be the sole deciding exam as to which category of residency a person can get?
It won't be the sole deciding criteria again. USMLE residency is all multifactorial. Like I told you, I've spoken to people with pretty good scores, a very good resume, have failed their interviews, and they haven't gotten into residency programs. So no, step 2 CK is not the sole deciding factor. Say if you still have not a very good score but a manageable score on step 2 CK, you have other things well put on your application, you still might be able to get into residency. So I wouldn't say that's the sole. Yeah, that would be a factor that would differentiate you from an American graduate.
Okay, the next question is, ma'am, is clerkship or electives required for PLAB as well?
I don't think so. I don't think, but I'm not really sure about everything that PLAB has to say, because I've not done much of research on that. I don't think I will be the best person to answer for PLAB.
Next question, what made you choose between USMLE and PLAB?
Okay, so what made me choose between USMLE and PLAB is that the first most factor, I wouldn't lie, is that half of my family is in United States. So I would definitely like to go there. Second, if you consider academics wise, UK, when you decide to give PLAB, and the time required for PLAB preparation is comparatively lesser than for USMLE. That's why a lot of people choose PLAB in UK. But then you have to work over there as would just be similar to your internship. You need to do that training for a year or two before you can start your practice in UK. Also, you need a minimum of 1 year experience, a work experience in UK or India before you can get your license. So for me, that was a put off. I didn't really want to go to UK, and I would rather go to United States because I like the culture there. I have my family there, and I mean, yeah, that's the reason I chose to take USMLE.
Suppose I pass all my exams, what are my chances in otolaryngology fellowship? I'm a ENT specialist in my country.
Okay, so fellowship has a very different criteria per se. If you're already a postgraduate, I mean, definitely you could just look up for criteria of different universities. Fellowship altogether has a very different requirement. I think there are very good chances that you might get in because fellowships are not that big of a process or task to get into. But definitely, yeah, there are good chances that you might get in. But the criterias would depend on the programs that different states and universities have to offer. There's no such specific this thing to it, as far as I know.
From who do you suggest we take letters of recommendation? Does it have to be from HODs or any teachers?
So, letter of recommendations mainly are given by people who you have worked with, who have seen your work, and they would wish to write you a good letter of recommendation. So, if you have done your postings in any department, if you have developed a good rapport with your, unit head, or has the people you've worked with, not the residents obviously, but a faculty member, yeah, a letter of recommendation from HOD would be really great. But if the HOD doesn't wish to give you that, if you have a good rapport with the unit head or associate professor or anybody there, definitely do get it from them. Also, the dean has to give a letter of recommendation from the institution. So that plays an important role.
The next question is, even though neurosurgery is a highly competitive residency, but still, what will it take to get into it? And please highlight on research too.
Okay, so we've heard this a lot that it's difficult to take surgical branches in United States compared to the branches of medicine. That was true a little while ago, but medicine has equivalently become competitive as surgery. Um, and yeah, I mean, it is little difficult to get into surgical branches because there are very few seats, very few programs, and they prefer their own graduates over international graduates. So, one of my seniors that I know of who really wanted to pursue surgery, he did a research program at John Hopkins, if I'm not wrong. He was there for a 2 year, 2 or 3 year or 3 year research program. The faculty members evaluated him, his progress over there, and he has been shortlisted for Yale for general surgery. Okay, so I mean, if you do a 2 or 3 year research program there, you build up a good rapport, you show how interested you are, how keen you are. That's definitely a path to take if you want to do neurosurgery. So, if there are institutes that offer you with a short term research course in the United States, that will definitely help you get there.
The next question is, what about the foreign medical students? Should they follow the same path and advice you have given?
As in? I mean, I didn't really understand this question. Can you repeat?
What about the foreign medical students? Should they follow the same path and advice you have given?
So, like I told you, there are only two ways. One is for a US graduate, and every other country which is non-US is considered as international medical graduates, and the pathway for all of them is the same, like the pathway that I described. These are the requirements for anybody from outside the country to be able to practice there.
The next question is, what is the maximum interval between giving step 1 exam and step 2 CK, and how long is the USMLE step 1 exam valid?
Okay, so once you've passed, it is, see, they say that you should finish all the steps within 7 years. That's their criteria. But what I would recommend is, like I told you, if you're a 2-year-old graduate, it's still better. If you're a 5-year-old graduate, your chances gradually decline the more you delay for applying for residency. So I said 6 months are needed for step 1. Say if you've given step 1, you could take a break for a while. Step 2 CK will require maximum of 4 months, I suppose. Okay, so CK would require lesser time than step 1, because CK is more of clinical, that you and you've cleared your basics with step 1, so it kind of becomes a little easier for you to finish the preparation for CK. It requires lesser time for CK. So yeah, I'd say 4 months of preparation for CK is enough. The application process in US starts September of every year, which is September 15th. So you need to have given, say 2021, okay, you need to complete all your steps before, by the end of August. You need to have all your results, your documentation, everything ready for you to be able to apply by September 15th. So the application is open till October or November, I guess, but it's mostly first come first basis. By October, the program directors already start reviewing your application. So a little difficult to get matched if you apply late. So try to apply by within the first week of when the application is open. Generally around November, December, you get interviews. So I've seen, according to data, if you apply for 100 programs, some people get 5 interviews, some people get 10. The ratio is very different. Like, you apply for a lot, you get only few interviews. So there's nothing to be sad about. That's how it is. That's how competitive that is. And you need to be in the States for you to be able to go to those interviews during that time. So when you apply in September, and you need to be around there in November, December, because they give you a 3-4 weeks notice, I guess, that you're selected and you need to come to the state for interview in this college. So you need to be prepared for that.
The next question is, are virtual rotations worth it?
Looking at the current scenario, that might be considered, as I said, but I am not really sure about it. I think if the flights are open and you're getting a chance to go there and do it, yes, please do that.
The next question is, they say IMGs don't usually get into surgery. Is it so?
I think I've already cleared that point.
I'm in internship right now. So should I go about electives with the current COVID situation?
Now that's a decision that you and your parents will have to make. If the flights are available, if it's safe, you could make inquiries over there about everything. If you don't have a family there, it becomes a little difficult. So make sure you have a place to stay nearby the elective. You could search it on Airbnb and other sites. Make sure everything is well pre-booked, not like you're going there and figuring it out, because times are difficult right now. But yes, if you can manage that, please do go there.
The next question is, what is the process of applying individually, and which hospitals accept IMGs for clerkship?
Okay, so that's like a very huge topic to talk on about the application process for electives. I'll just give you a brief as to say what all you require for you to apply. You need your transcripts, you need to have given TOEFL, like you should have your results of TOEFL. You need to have your vaccination chart, you need to do the vaccination, if any additional that they require. Now, again, specific criteria for specific hospitals and universities would be different. So, Brooklyn criteria were very different. Mount Sinai criteria were different. You could, I mean, I could definitely send you a list of universities or hospitals that take in. I would, I mean, just share your email address or anything with Sakshi so that I can get back to you with this.
The next question is: isn't appearing for next compulsory for all of us to obtain our license here, irrespective of venturing into USMLE path?
That's true, I suppose. I am not very well versed with Next because I am already a graduate and it was very different for me. I think you should take a proper opinion on how Next works. But yeah, irrespective of that, if you want to go to United States, you need USMLE.
How to get the letter of recommendations from the HOD?
Like I already told you, attend, give your best performance, request the HOD. See, if you are a batch of 250 and HOD doesn't even know you, and you randomly go say, sir or ma'am, I want this letter of recommendation, they'll be like, I've never seen you. I've never seen you attend. I've never seen you work. So it's your job to give your best, perform well. So if you're scoring well, you're automatically known by the HODs that yeah, you know, bunch of these people have scored well, and they know your progress as a student. They should know that in order for them to give you a good letter of recommendation.
The next question is: I'm currently studying in China in third year MBBS, and we have to complete internship here in China. And when we come back to India, then again we have to complete our internship after MCI exam or next. So that means we have two chances to complete my elective or clerkship as we are doing internship for 2 years.
But say you're in China, and if you do not plan to come to India altogether, why can't you apply for electives directly from China? I mean, that is possible. If at all you think India is your backup, uh, and after that you decide to come for electives or USMLE, now that's a decision that you need to make, whether you want to practice in India or you need to practice in other country.
Okay. The next question is, ma'am, suppose I've given my step one and cleared it, but couldn't get to the interview. Will my step one result become invalid and I have to give it again?
No,
If not, how long will the step one result remain valid for?
no, it's completely valid. See, you can only go for interviews once you've completed everything, all the steps, and they are valid for 7 years. So if in the first year you applied for residency, you didn't get matched, you don't have to give it again. You can apply again next year with those same scores. Or you could just try to figure out what went wrong within your first application. Was it if your letter of recommendation was not that great, if you couldn't do research in the first place, you could use that opportunity to work on your application more and reapply.
The next question is, can I give OET before step one?
Yeah, sure, you can do that. It's just an English proficiency exam. You can give it in any order. In fact, you can give step 2 CK first and step 1 later. People do that because they feel they've just cleared third and final year. They're very fresh with the clinical knowledge. They tend to give CK. But for me, I think you should give step 1 first because it clarifies a lot of things and it's easier for you to prepare and correlate the other diseases that you learn in third and final year MBBS.
The next question is, what visa is required for electives and clerkships?
You can go on the tourist visa, which is a B1, B2 visa. Um, if you already have it, like I already had my visa for 10 years, so I just went for it. I, in fact, did not kind of told them that I am going for electives. I rather told I'm going to visit my aunt since I have my family there. But yeah, if you are going for the sole purpose of electives, then you can show them your acceptance letter when you apply for a visa. You definitely get a B1, B2 visa and you can go on that.
Is it better to give USMLE this year?
I mean, for me personally, I would prefer a score on step one. But don't rush into it just because you have to give it in this year. Do not do it until you're very well prepared.
The next question is, are US citizens who have done MBBS in India considered as IMGs or AMGs, and are they given any preference?
They are also considered as IMGs partly, but yeah, the citizenship gives them an edge over other people. They definitely, I think they do prefer them more over whoever is not a citizen. But since the education and the degree was in India, they have to follow that process too.
The next question is, what is the paper format and total score?
Okay, so like I told you, it's a percentile, but it's usually out of 280. So it's a block of 40 questions, and there are 7 such blocks. So the exam lasts for 8 hours. Okay, you get 1 hour for each block. Now, there is no particular this thing that first block will be on anatomy, second block will be on pharmacology. They are just blocks of questions with everything integrated. So yeah, the type of questions completely based on clinical scenarios, completely clinical, nothing factual.
Yeah, that was the last question.
Okay, so I hope I have cleared everything for whoever attended this session with me, and yeah, I would get back with the universities for whoever that question was. And thank you everyone for attending and hosting this session with me.
I'll move to the vote of thanks. Okay, so first of all, good evening, everyone. I, Sakshi Bharti, feel immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of Medscape community for today's event. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Kritika Bhatia, for enlightening us with her knowledge. Today's session cleared so many of our doubts and enhanced our understanding about USMLE. I'm sure this session is going to help us all with our studies in future. I would like to thank Ma'am once again for taking out time from her busy schedule and sharing her insight on the topic with all of us. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the entire Medscape community who worked really hard to make this event a success. I also extend my thanks to all the students attending this session and for being such an engaging audience. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. It was a pleasure to be here and help you guys. And I really wish my seniors and everyone would have helped me so much.